waiting on Jessica.
Jessica's fault.
We're waiting on Jessica. She'll be here in a minute. Oh, there she is.
Welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you.
you for joining us.
You gotta turn on your microphone.
Wait,
Listen,
viewing
that sounds
comments.
crazy. Do you have to do that?
Hello.
If this is any indication of how this is going to go.
It's gonna go wonderful.
It's gonna be wonderful.
We have lots of wisdom.
All right, let's go. Let's go. Can anybody hear us?
Maybe that's what this. Surely.
And Shirley.
She'll know whether we can hear her or not.
I got a weird hair.
All right, so we're going to go forward. Hopefully you can hear us. If you're watching, yeah, give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a comment or something that lets us know if you can hear us. One of my favorite things, number one, thanks for joining us. Thank you for allowing us time in your day to just come share some thoughts and parts of our heart with you. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. I think those are so important. I think they're necessary. And my favorite thing is being able to talk about boundaries is we can take it back all the way back to Genesis. And so they're important in so many ways. But I think it's important that we understand to start off with that a boundary is not a weapon. It's not intended to be used as a weapon, as divisive. It's not something that you deploy just because you get angry or upset with somebody. A boundary is not punishment, not for you or for them. Boundaries are necessary. This says a boundary is a description of what you need in order to remain healthy and present. And that's it. It's information about you, not a judgment about somebody else. So think about it this way. A fence around a garden. The fence is not there to punish the neighbors, it's there to protect the garden. So the garden needs certain conditions to grow. Enough sun, enough water, enough space, and protection from things that would damage it. So just naming those things, you can see that the fence isn't hostile. It's simply honest about what the garden requires. So let's go ahead and cross the bridge there into recovery. How does this relate to recovery? Your heart and your recovery is the garden. It's what's growing. And so it's what needs to be protected, and the conditions that allow it to grow are non-negotiable. So the boundaries around that, how you protect that, shouldn't cause you guilt. No matter how much guilt others try to put on you, we don't have to own that. We can allow our boundaries to serve as that protective barrier around ourselves, around our heart, around our recovery, around our growth, and all those things. Specifically, Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart because everything flows from it. Not some things, everything. So your ability to stay sober flows from that. Your capacity for genuine connections flow from that. Your access to hope, to clarity, to the kind of spiritual awareness that keeps you grounded, all of that flows from the conditions of your heart. So a heart that's constantly exposed to things that destabilize it, constantly saying yes when you need to say no, constantly absorbing harm from other people or other environments without protection, that heart does not become more generous or more resilient over time. It becomes exhausted. When we continue to allow things inside those boundaries that are necessary, we become exhausted, and then all of a sudden our recovery is in a very neutral or negative state. So when you set a boundary, you're not abandoning somebody. That's a misconception. I think we think when we say no, or we say not right now, or we say give me some time, or we build some absolute parameters around ourselves, I think our human nature for the most part is we don't want to offend somebody else, and it's often at our own expense. And so we're reluctant for those boundaries. But here's my favorite part. The favorite part about boundaries, and this came from, I don't remember when it was, but what I really, really love about boundaries, and it may surprise you, it may not, it may just be my light bulb moment, it was just for me. There are so many scriptures that, not necessarily, the Bible doesn't necessarily use modern words like boundaries as the concept, but the principles of boundaries run throughout all the way back to Genesis. If you think about it, in the beginning, God separated light from darkness. That's a boundary. God separated waters, water from above and the waters below. He separated sea from dry land. He gave animals of the air and animals of the land. Vegetation by its own kind. So all of these are boundaries. All of these were God created boundaries from the very, very beginning. So this, more than anything, should help you understand that boundaries are necessary. God designed us and the earth and life as we know it with boundaries. And so why wouldn't we desire boundaries? What's the struggle with that other than we become more concerned about the other people because we're convinced that boundaries are, as I said in the very beginning, a weapon. Boundaries are offensive, and they shouldn't be, because what's at stake? Our recovery is at stake.
I love that. And so we'll move on to emotional versus physical boundaries. A lot of people just think about personal, physical boundaries. Don't go to the bar, don't hang out with people you used to hang out with, don't go back to that relationship, just the things, the very simple things. They say if you go to a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And they're not wrong, and so we look at those, but when do we really look at like the emotional boundary side of things? And so those boundaries matter enormously. They are real, concrete, and often life-saving. You think about it, and I had never known how to set real boundaries. When I was in jail, this last time I was in jail for almost 3 years, and when I got out, I learned so many new things. And one of those things was how to start setting boundaries, how to start saying no. My grandmother had my youngest son, Oakley, and so one of the boundaries that I had to set to protect my recovery was, when I paroled out, I wanted to go home, and then I really didn't have peace with that, and the parole board didn't let me, so they denied my home plan. Well, I went to a rehab, like a halfway house in Nashville, and I could have been done in 3 months and come home. But upon praying and really reflecting on my recovery, I didn't feel like it was the right time for me to come home yet. And so my grandmother was really ready and excited for me to come home. She really desperately needed my help. But to maintain my recovery, I really did not believe that it was time for me to come home. And so I had to set a recovery boundary. I had to say, I want to be there with my son, and golly, I desperately wanted to be there with him. I desperately wanted to do what I wanted to do, but it wasn't the right thing. And so I set that boundary. I believe that it hurt her feelings, and so we kind of had some words about it, nothing crazy, but it was so hard and it was so scary for me to set that boundary, but I thrived. I learned how to pay my bills. I learned how to maintain a job. I learned how to make sure I got to work even when I didn't have a ride because I rode the bus. I learned how to do everything that I needed to do. God set me up throughout that year because I chose His way and I chose my recovery first before anything else. And so we don't really think about that. So another way that an emotional boundary could be, they protect you from taking on other people's emotional states as your own responsibility. that would have been super easy for me to do. Well, she's going to be mad at me. She's going to be upset with me. My son's not going to understand all the things. But at the end of the day, if mama's not okay, nobody's okay. And that's just, that's something that I've really had to become okay with, because I have to make choices for my recovery today that support my recovery, because if I don't, then it's going to crumble. And so something that I had, I really liked in this, what about whenever we grew up in a chaotic or unsafe environment, and so we learned that we have to be responsible for these people's emotions. We learn how to read the room. We learn how to, protect ourselves from them getting upset. So in those situations, we still have to learn how to become okay with just us being okay. Like, it's not our responsibility. Nobody else is my responsibility besides now my children. I am in a good place. I am in an okay place. So, just practicing that. What if you make yourself feel smaller so that someone else is comfortable? Have you ever walked out of a room somewhere because you didn't want to make anybody uncomfortable? I think we've all done that. That's not love. It's a kind of love that has no bottom, no supply line, nothing coming back in. And a person who's giving everything and receiving nothing, eventually they run out of something to give. And so I think that we've all been in those situations before where we give and we give and we give, and finally we've given all of ourselves and we have nothing of ourselves left. And so emotional boundaries also protect you from that, but it protects you from language that diminishes your recovery. Not everyone understands. And so, there's been situations with family members of mine, that I've had to distance myself from because we don't speak the same recovery language. Not that I don't love you.
That's a big deal.
Not that I don't want to be near you. Not that I don't want to be a part of your life. But you don't understand my recovery, and so that's okay. Like, I still love you. I still desire a relationship with you, but I have to protect myself and my recovery, and so that's really hard. That's really, really hard, because I don't want my family, certain people, to think that I don't love them, because I do deeply, just as much as I loved you yesterday or 10 years ago, but I don't operate the same way that I used to operate. And so guarding your heart emotionally might look like leaving a conversation that has become verbally harmful rather than staying and absorbing it. Being honest with a family member about what you can and cannot talk about right now. If you get heightened in a conversation with them, anybody, no matter whether it's family, your kids, anybody, it's okay to say, what, I need a minute. I'm not in a place where I can talk to you kindly, like I love you, without being a certain type of way. It's okay to say that. And it's hard, because you fear what they're going to say back. You fear what people are going to think about you. Oh, well, you can't handle this or whatever. Like, no, I can. I'm handling it the best healed way that I can. Like, I just don't want to talk right now. Choosing not to engage with social media content that reliably sends you to a dark place. If you know that that's going to upset you, don't look at it. Don't do it. Do not engage. Recognizing when someone's crisis is theirs to carry, and offering support without picking up the whole weight of yourself. And so that is probably one of the biggest things, because people say, well, I've been in recovery, and so now I can go back to that trap house and I can go help them people out of addiction, or so-and-so's called me because the house is on fire, well, I gotta go put it out. No, you don't. And that's something I think that we all practice here at our job, is that at the end of the day, like, we love people and we desire to help you, and we will go to the ends of the earth with you. But if you call me at midnight and you're drunk, I'm probably going to say, call 988. If you're in a crisis, call 988. I'm not a crisis counselor. I love you. These are resources that I have. I can take you to detox. But if you're not willing, then I'm probably going to tell you that I need to get off the phone. Because I'm not a counselor, and it really is not a healthy place for me to be anyways. Like, it's not a healthy place for anybody to be. And so, it's really hard to set boundaries. It's really hard to find the line, because, you know, like we do love people. We love people so much that it hurts. You know, we want it for you most of the time. Not most of the time, sometimes more than you want it for yourself. You know, if you're still in your active addiction, like we've been there, we've done that, we love you, we want to help you. But it's hard, you know, and so it's learning to set personal boundaries, emotional boundaries, work boundaries. All of the boundaries have been probably a big challenge for me. I think that God's provided me a lot of grace in that, and He's given me a lot of strength to be able to do those. You know, so it's possible. It is hard though. So physical and emotional boundaries work together. Neither one alone is sufficient. Recovery asks you to pay attention to both. To the rooms you walk into and the thoughts and feelings you allow to take up residence. Guarding your heart is a whole life practice. Yeah, it's big. Yeah, it's big.
There's a lot of good stuff in there. So my part is the guilt that comes with boundaries. And I know for me personally, I dealt with this a lot because by nature, I'm a people pleaser. I'm codependent. I want to make everybody happy. I don't. You know, when I got clean from opiates in 2013, a big thing that I learned in my 30 days at New Leaf was that I had literally been killing myself to stuff down emotions because I didn't want to upset anybody else with the way that I felt. So boundaries were very hard for me. It was very hard for me to come to terms with the fact that it was okay for me to choose myself first. I felt very guilty about that. My children were all basically adults when I was in the throes of my addiction. My daughter turned 18 when I was in detox, and she turned 21 when I was in prison. So my children were significantly older than most people's children are when I went through my addiction. So when I got home from prison and I was clean from everything and I'm trying to start living a new life, like I had 3 angry adults, you know, and it was very hard for me to stick to my boundaries and stick to my principles and keep trying to walk out a godly life and a Christ-driven recovery because I had these boundaries, but I wanted so badly to do for my children what I couldn't do for them before. And so guilt parenting is a big thing. You know, learning to have boundaries with your children is so hard, and it's very hard to do, especially if you don't have people around you who can encourage you that you're doing the right thing. You know, you can't make up for your failures as a parent in the past by still failing as a parent in your present. You're just not doing drugs now. So that was really hard for me. My youngest son is particularly tempered like I am. And so we would butt heads a lot because, you know, he's very much like me. And so he would want something so much and I would want him so much to not do it. And, you know, I just really wanted to give in, and we would kind of get a little excessive. You know, he's almost 24 now, so it's not the same anymore. However, you know, I went through a great deal of this, the guilt that comes with the boundaries. And so there's a part on here that says, you're sad that the person you love is not safe to be close to right now, and that's a big deal. You're sad that recovery sometimes means choosing between your well-being and someone else's expectations. Grief is appropriate there. That sadness is real and it deserves to be acknowledged, but grief is not the same as wrongdoing. So, another example, I only have one nephew. My brother only has one child on this planet, and it's the only child he's ever going to have. And I love my nephew very much. He's maybe like 12 years young. I think it was 12 when he was born, something like that. And we used to, we would just run it together. We were just out being real bad people together. And, you know, so when I got clean, he was still in his addiction, and I just loved him so much, and I tried so hard to just not, you know, it got to the point that, you know, Christian, if you're watching this, I love you. But sometimes he would call me and he would just be like, you know, you just think you're just this great person now and you're so much better than me and all of the things. And that was so hard for me. But I had to stick to my boundaries in my recovery because as much as I loved him, I knew that I could not show him, I could not go back there to where he was at. And so I would just tell him, you know, I love you, but I'm not going to talk to you. And I would hang up the phone. And it would just break my heart. But there came a time where he got clean. And he would call me and he would say, hey, I love you, Auntie, you know, and it was just always this unspoken thing between us. As much as we love each other, like, we don't hang out, you know. I think he's like 4 years sober now, 4 years clean now. And, you know, I see him sometimes at my mom's, or he'll, you know, we send each other messages on Instagram and whatever. And we're rebuilding our relationship, but there still is that, and I'm so proud of him that he has his boundaries. And I just love it so much that even though, you know, there are those times where, you know, I'm like, I want to go down there and hang out with him when he's down at my mom's house, but I don't want to put him in a position that he's uncomfortable and it brings something up for him. So sometimes your own boundaries have to include respecting other people's boundaries. Because just because I'm in a place that maybe I could hang out with him doesn't mean that he's in a place that he can hang out with me. So that, I think a lot of that goes, especially when you're dealing with family members or, you know, good friends, lifetime friends, and then they kind of come along behind you. Like, we can't expect people to be as resolute in their boundaries as we are, or in their recovery as we are, or, you know, any of the things. It's really hard. You can let this guilt eat you up. But one thing I had to keep in mind, I was very selfish in my addiction. And I loved me more than anything. And even though now, you know, I love God more than anything, but I still have to love me. Tori says it all the time. I love you, but I love me more. And so I think that kind of, for me, the further I get into my recovery, like, that's a big thing for me, is I have to remember, like, you know, I do love you, but I'm going to love you from over here because I have to love me more. Conviction usually leads somewhere, so it should point towards a specific repair. There is a difference in guilt and conviction. And it's really important to try to, you know thyself. Like, know your heart, know scripture, know your boundaries. Know the difference in a boundary that you set in anger, a bad decision that hurt rather than protected the other person. Just know the difference in boundaries, bad decisions, and acting out of anger. And just make sure that you're setting the right precedence in whatever relationship you're trying to set that in. I really like this. It says, you are allowed to need what you need. Guarding your heart is not a violation of love. It is a prerequisite for it. I just really love that. I love everything about this. It's not very often that we really get into something as challenging as, you know, we kind of skimmed over boundaries a few weeks ago, but nothing to this extent. Like, it's hard. It is hard for me to tell people that I love that, like, I can't help you. I have, you know, there's some people that I just love very much who we try, you know, and I'll get messages like, hey, we need this, or we need this, or can you help us with this? And, you know, for so long I did it, and then I just really had to look at it one day and I was like, am I helping you or am I hurting you? And so, as much as I hate it, and I would love to give everybody the world all the time, like, I had to tell myself, like, I had to stop doing it. And it was a boundary I had to set for myself. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes boundaries aren't even involving other people. Yeah. It's like, you know, this is a stopping point for me, and I can't go past it, or I'm going to be mentally, spiritually, emotionally in trouble. So,
I mean, those, for me, I agree. I mean, those are so hard. Boundaries, with family and friends to pick you,
Yep.
to pick me, to love me. Because if I go all the way back to when my addiction started, my addiction started with some people who I loved more than life. I mean, my addiction started with my family and against, I don't know, I mean, at that time, I don't know that I really knew Jesus, but I had a conviction against what I was doing.
Yeah.
Because it was with people that I loved, and I wanted more than anything for those people to keep loving me. And so I participated in things because it was with people that I loved, because I wanted them to love me. And then it just, accelerated and ended up a thing. And then fast forward, when I did surrender it all to the Lord, I still don't think I really got it, but after I surrendered it, I had the strength. At the time, I didn't really know where that strength came from, but to look at those people, family members and some really close friends, and say, I love you, but we probably aren't going to spend much time together anymore. And it broke my heart after those conversations. I grieved and I wanted them so much. And I understand today why those conversations weren't possible, but I didn't know then where that strength come from. But the closer I get to the Lord, and the more solid and further into my recovery, and it's not anything really that I talk a whole lot about now, but I can reflect back on relationships 10 years ago that had potential to surface, allow my recovery to pale, and that I had to allow distance to develop. And it wasn't that I necessarily chose them, but the Lord gave me an opportunity for a boundary and awareness that I just allowed some things to dissolve that I knew if I didn't, that I would be right back in my addiction. And you mentioned the boundaries with others. And I earlier had made some notes of some specific scriptures that I'll go ahead and share. Proverbs 22, 24 through 25, warnings against close associations with angry or destructive people. Matthew 18, 15 through 17, Jesus gives a step-by-step process for addressing conflict, which implies healthy relationship limits. 1 Corinthians 15, 33. And we use this scripture so loosely, so flippantly, but if you go back and you really apply it, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, bad company corrupts good character. See, you can roll that off. How many times have you just flippantly said that? But that's a boundary. That's a scripture that we can apply to a boundary, that we can love ourselves and choose ourselves when we can see potential harm for a boundary that's best for our recovery and for our heart.
So I think people struggle to set boundaries because even though they might see the principle of that boundary, see like, yeah, where that boundary would make sense, it's very hard to see it play out in your life, especially if you've never set boundaries before. So some examples of those, boundaries with people who are still using, like everybody hit on that. And that's a big one for me. When I first got clean, like I grew up in a family of addicts. My mom used and she partied, and both my brothers did, and it was just accepted and it was okay. And I first started drinking and partying with them, and the first time that I got clean, I did not fit in there anymore. And those were people that I loved. Like that was my roots. That's where I was grounded at, and like I loved them, especially my two brothers. Like we were so close. And when I got clean, you feel like the outcast. And the enemy will use that. He will use that. He'll be like, well, look, you're not even part of their family anymore. But you have to set that boundary. Like you just can't keep going there. Since I've been in recovery, some places that I've had to apply that boundary. A boy that had to live with me numerous times when I was in addiction, and I just thought that I would always do anything to help him. And after I was in recovery for a while, he called and he said, I am homeless and I'm on Main Street and I have no shoes and it was pouring the rain. And he said, I just need to sleep on your couch. And I knew right then that I had to say, listen, I love you and I hope that something plays out for you, but that cannot be me. Just recently, somebody that I had been very close to, because you develop bonds and addiction,
Mhm.
because those are the people that are not judging you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get no judgment from your fellow users. And just recently, a girl reached out to me and she said, listen, mom is, and her mom is still using it. I mean, her mom was one of my very, very closest friends for, like, we went through a lot together. She said, mom just needs a friend. And I said, I cannot be that. And that, you know, that was hard for me. But I did say, you know, if she wants to go to treatment, I can get her there.
Yeah.
But I cannot be a friend to her anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard, but it's very necessary, because where those bonds are is where your weakness is too. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
Another example is events and environments. I remember when I went to IOP, I don't remember the exact way that they worded it. They said you have to change your people, your places, and your playgrounds, or
Yeah.
whatever. You know, it might be that somebody can go in a bar and not be using drugs and not get drunk, but for an addict, that is just, you just have to set that boundary.
Yeah.
You know, some people can, but you can't,
Yeah.
and you just have to accept that. But I have there's different rules for me
Yeah.
as an addict to stay clean than there is for other people, and I'm okay with that now. Another place, and this is probably will sound strange, but meetings and like recovery meetings and support groups, you have to be very careful there. Especially when you're fresh, new in recovery. Like a lot of those people, they're there maybe not even because they want to be there. Maybe it's somewhere that they have to be and they're still using, and that's a very dangerous environment for somebody that's new in recovery to be in. You have to be really selective about those. For me, I've never went to a lot of like the 12-step meetings and like that fourth dimension and stuff like that. I've tried while I've been in recovery to stay with a faith-based recovery meeting is what has worked best for me. Just because, you know, you're going to run into your old friends, and a lot of them are still going to be using and just be. You have to be like, I believe that God brings us out of addiction not just for us, but so that we can be a light to those people. But you have to have a very firm boundary in what that looks like. You know, it don't mean run, give them a ride over, or picking them up and letting them sleep on your couch. It means setting an example, offering them resources to find recovery yourself.
Yeah.
But it's very, you have to be really careful with it. The verse we're talking about, Proverbs 4:23, what the beginning of that says is, in all, what does it say? About guarding your heart. Above all else. It says, above all else, guard your heart, because all that you do flows from it. You know, that don't mean like when it's convenient, or if it's somebody that I'm really upset with anyway, I can set that boundary, but this person over here who has never hurt me, you have to set the boundaries with them too. It says, keep returning to the question, what does my heart need to stay well and to stay healthy? You know, so anytime that you're like, where does the boundary need to be? You know, what is best for me? What's going to protect my heart? That's a question that we can always go back to.
Yeah, I think you made a good point too, and I think we have to be careful. Even faith-based recovery 12-step meetings. I mean, I too would prefer that over the other, but even in that, are you laughing at me?
No. I got a cold chill a second ago.
She saw herself
I involuntary shivered, and so I seen it on
There's
there.
a lag. Sorry.
That's okay. Even in those, we have to be careful to not put false expectations on people in recovery just because we're in a faith-based 12-step recovery meeting, because those two it's still filled with people who are made of the same flesh we are, and they may be struggling, they may not be as strong in the moment as we may need them to be. So I think just because it is a faith-based recovery, you don't go in there with a false idea of how people should be because it's a faith-based recovery group. I think we need to understand that even there, it can be slippery, but I think it's important that we recognize you got to take good care of yourself. If you're struggling, even if it is in meetings, take your sponsor with you. Go ask your sponsor to join you, your counselor, whoever holds this journey with you. You know, if you're in that moment or you're in that time, you're in that season, reach out. Don't ever try to do it alone. Don't even go into a meeting. You don't have to choose to do this. I can be strong and go to this meeting all on my own. God created us for companionship. He doesn't call us to do anything alone. Yes, He goes with us, but He also gives us people for support. So whoever holds your journey with you, take them with you. And if the boundary, if it feels too big, whoever walks this journey with you, link arms with somebody to travel that road with you, because everything you do, your recovery, your relationships, your capacity to receive and extend grace, it all flows from the condition of your heart. You are worth protecting. Your recovery is worth protecting. So it's not selfish. Boundaries are not selfish. And all things flow from the condition of your heart. And if you can protect that like that garden, build that fence, build that boundary around that and protect that, because it goes with you.
And you know, I've said before, we all are looking for peace. Everybody wants peace. And the only way to have that is to guard your heart. You know, and the way to do that is with boundaries. Where boundaries might be tough, it does protect your inner peace.
For sure.
There's a piece on here that I wanted to read, but I got caught up in what I was saying earlier and I didn't. It says, a person's anger at your boundary is not evidence that the boundary is wrong. It is evidence that the boundary is inconvenient for them, and that is not the same thing.
That is good.
That is good stuff.
Yeah. So that makes me think of scripture, Acts 17:26. God Himself sets boundaries of time and place for nations and people. Job 38:8-11 is God setting boundaries for the sea as a picture of His order and design. Don't let the guilt of setting a boundary, because knowing that your boundary may offend or hurt somebody else, your truth, it's not your fault that your truth offends somebody. And if your truth is your boundary, it's not the cross for you to carry because they're offended or they don't receive it the way that you intend it.
I was offensive when I didn't have boundaries.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that was one thing that I had to look at, you know, when you're getting, because people will call you selfish and they will
attack.
say the things, and it's like, I was selfish when I was getting high, it just didn't bother you then, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was one thing that really I had to remind myself was it's okay to be selfish in that way now. I mean, I was being selfish then, I'm just trying to be selfish in a healthy way, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd still call that selfish, but, you know, I mean,
And you
have
can't
to.
get caught up in defending that.
Yeah.
Because people are going to bite. People are going to attack, whether it's through their conviction or their disapproval or whatever it causes in them. Be careful to understand that your truth is okay. Your boundary is okay. And don't feel like you have to defend your boundary.
I had
That's
somebody,
hard too.
the same person that had more than once said to me, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget where you came from. And
How
I
could
finally
I
learned to reply
keep
that I
reminding you?
remember exactly where I came from, and I am making sure I don't go back there.
Yeah.
But that's not even where I want to go back to.
Yeah.
But
That's good. Very good. She's very entertained by our new microphones.
show
Hey.
them the microphones.
Our little fuzzy microphones. Little thing, that's the
And we'll leave you with the question, whose idea do you think those were out of this for?
Oh yeah, that one's a hard one to figure out. Also, we'll leave you with this. If you need prayer, if you would like for us to lift you up in prayer, leave a heart in the comments. We would love nothing more than to pray for you. If you need help, if you're in that place where you're struggling setting boundaries, you need that person to link arms with you, just reach out to us, let us know. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for being here, everybody.
The finish button.
Bye.
Yeah.